Welcome back to another episode of Contractor Secrets with Trade Business Accountants. My name is Troy Larkham, and today we're talking with Dr. Thomas C. Schleifer. Dr. Schleifer joined the construction industry at the age of 16, and today has more than 60 years of contracting and consulting experience to his name. He has both a Bachelor of Science and a Master's of Science degree in Construction Management from East Carolina University, and a PhD also in Construction Management from Heriot-Watt University in Scotland. Dr. Schleifer's experience includes serving as a foreman, a field superintendent, project manager, and vice president of a construction company that he owned with his brother. Then from 1976 to 1986, he was the founder and president of the largest international consultancy firm servicing the contract surety industry. During this period, he assisted in the resolution or salvage of hundreds of distressed or failed construction firms and projects. This combination of practical hands-on experience as a contractor and assisting financially distressed companies has given Dr. Schleifer a unique perspective on the causes of business failure and how to avoid them. He's the author of The Secrets to Construction Business Success, Managing the Profitable Construction Business, Construction Contractors Survival Guide, Glossary of Suretyship and Related Terms, and numerous training guides. Dr. Schleifer is sometimes referred to as a turnaround expert because of the number of construction enterprises that he has rescued from financial distress. The importance of education in the construction industry is one of Dr. Schleifer's favorite themes. He's a former chairman of the Continuing Education Committee of the Associated General Contractors of America and has lectured extensively at universities, professional and trade associations, and authored numerous articles and publications on construction and business management. It's also why we have the honor and the privilege today to sit down and have a chat with Dr. Schleifer on today's podcast. So Tom, welcome to the show. How are you doing this morning, or should I say afternoon over there for you over in Arizona?
Doing very well, and I appreciate you having me on, Troy.
Fantastic. Well, look, really glad to have you on the show today, Tom. But first things first, let's kick things off with a bit of background about yourself, just so the audience understand who you are. Obviously, I've given a bit of an introduction and a bit of context, but I'd love to hear your story from you. Where did you grow up? How did you get into this industry, and so on?
All right. As you and I have discussed in the past, I have a unique perspective on the industry because I started as an apprentice, served at a carpenter apprenticeship, actually went into it underage, had to fib about my age to get started, and moved up pretty quick, got to become a foreman. And it didn't take me long to realize I wanted to advance in the industry. So I went to school nights, went to engineering school 4 nights a week for years, and advanced to superintendent, project manager. My brother, who was a building contractor, eventually came to me and asked me to join him as a partner in the business so that we could grow that together, which we did for 15 years. And at that point, I spun off another business, which became my primary activity, and that was to finish projects, construction projects of every type for bonding companies. As you know, the surety industry guarantees payment and completion of jobs that fail financially or for whatever reason. And I serviced that industry completing projects. And it was very interesting in that by doing that for actually 13 years before I sold the business, my firm, myself and my firm, we were on site to learn why these failures happened. And I took a great interest. After several years in the business, I started to record and determine exactly what the first primary cause, secondary cause of failure was, and collected information finally to define the number of causes and the reasons behind them, which was the subject of my first book, Construction Contractors Survival Guide, which goes back to the early 70s. And from that took a real interest in what was going on in the industry. When I sold that business, it was the largest completion company for bonding companies in the nation. I had regional offices across the United States and actually had an international division. And we were completing in the years just before I sold it, about $1 billion worth of construction a year on projects that were already partially completed, from just started to almost finished. It didn't matter what stage they were in when they failed. So gained a great deal of experience as to those causes. And that's what caused me to end up selling the business and then later in life going back to school to get a PhD degree, which I did in Edinburgh, Scotland, because the PhDs in the United States at that time were purely engineering and purely scientific, where the British system uses a research base. In fact, you have to have your research topic and subject accepted by the university before you are accepted as a student. And the research just attracted me for whatever reason. It just dug in and tried to figure out some things that caused the things that I didn't do well when I was in the construction business. In fact, as I've also told you, if I knew then what I know now, I'd have probably never left the construction business. It would have been much more profitable. But that brings us to how you discovered me through currently I'm sharing a weekly construction message with the industry, trying to share some of what I've learned through the years. I'm pretty much semi-retired. And apparently you got a hold of that somewhere, and that's what brings us to be speaking today.
Yeah, 100%. And for any of those listening, is what I'll do is I'll put a link in the below description of this podcast to go actually sign up for Dr. Schleifer's weekly message. Really, really great stuff. Articulates problems, issues, solutions, and et cetera, really, really well. We're actually, Dr. Schleifer has given us the honor and the privilege to be able to share that with our audience as well. So we'll be having that on our articles. But with that there is, I just want to take it back, because obviously you made the note there, Tom, where, if you knew what you knew now, you would have stayed in the contracting business. But I am curious, going all the way back to those days where you were a contractor with your brother, talk me through that time period, and what were the biggest lessons learned there? What were the biggest struggles? And just share a bit of insight into what that was like for you.
Well, that was so long ago that we didn't have the tools we have today, even the computer, if you will, to just do the estimating. So one of the real constraints to our growth was we actually had to do work to figure out what it cost so we could estimate the next job. And often made mistakes. We'd take something that was a little different, foundations were different, the structure was different, whatever, and we'd be guessing at a lot of it. We could build it, but we couldn't price it, which of course was critical to our business. But as I look back, just an aside on all of what we did over those years, we learned on the run, as so many contractors did. And I love the business. I have no complaints. Made a lot of money at it. I can't complain about it. But I just wish I knew then what I know now. But as I look back, people have said, what was the best years? And I've had to think about that over time. And quite frankly, it's being a field superintendent.
Yeah.
When I was a field superintendent, I was in charge of everything. It was really a nice place to be in. You were building, but not actually getting dirty, and fascinating and interesting. And the vice president of construction would come on the job. This is before I was in my own business. And he'd be yelling, screaming, ranting and raving about one thing or another, get back in his car and leave the site. And I just go back to doing it the way I was doing it. I mean, I called myself the president or CEO inside the fence, meaning inside the construction fence. And depending if it was a small job, I may not have even had a fence, but inside the site. Yeah. So I really enjoyed the freedom of being a superintendent.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I guess you've just mentioned, so back then, you're a young man in those days. Is looking back now, is if you could tap yourself on the shoulder, what would you say to yourself back then? What would be the advice that you would really give to yourself?
Well, I guess I would be much more careful about the work I took. I realized that we are so much more specialized than we know. My brother and I were building contractors, and we actually had the attitude one building's the same as the other, which isn't really true.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're making good money building warehouses and open box stores, I don't recommend you take a hospital, because a hospital building, it's very much different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we didn't know that. So we stumbled through the various things that we learned to build. And I just would have tried, I guess, to add more science to what we did.
Yeah.
We considered it purely technical. If we could build it, we'd take the work. And we lost sight of the fact you've got to build it for a profit.
Yeah.
You can't just take the job because that looks really good. And more than once, we'd take a job in town because we wanted our sign on it. We wanted to be the builder of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had an old church in Morristown, New Jersey, which was abutting the town that our company was in, that burned to the ground. It had old 2-foot thick stone walls collapsed in. Well, we wanted that job. It was right in the center of town. It was a historic building, and they were going to rebuild it like it was.
Yeah.
And it just, that's no reason to take a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was very different than anything we'd ever done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were so happy to have our sign on it. So I think contractors get caught up in that and really forget we're in this for a profit.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And that's something, one of my favorite lines is contractors getting caught up in top line revenue, because top line revenue is sexy. It's the vanity metric people love to talk about. And similarly with what you're talking about there is having your sign in the middle of town. Hey, this is our project. We're doing this in front of everyone. It's that vanity side of things that's driving the decision to really go with that project. But at the end of the day, like you've experienced, and we see it all the time, is you can end up in some pretty sticky situations going for those projects if you're not making the profit. You've got to be profit driven and focusing on making sure you're making the profit that you need on the job that makes sense for the business at the end of the day. And even on that is, obviously you're kind of talking a bit there about project selection, which I'm sure we'll go into in a bit more detail later on. But our director here, Warren, his background is in energy infrastructure. And similar thing where his background, he largely done energy infrastructure in the public space. So a lot of government works and whatnot. And that was what he was good at. That was what he was used to, doing those larger projects. And he had the processes in place and the experience and the knowledge to be able to deliver those projects. And I believe it was it might have been a project manager, was for one of the builders that he worked with, was doing a private project as well, which was a hospital. But Warren's experience was in the public space, not necessarily the private space, but the attraction of this guy wanting him to solve the problem for him, as well as, hey, why not? Private shouldn't be too different to public. That was one of the big mistakes that he learned on that project. Is he went out there and he said, for that hospital, something that he wasn't familiar with, he's going out there, he's having to meet with the CEO of that hospital time and time again. The resources involved in him personally having to be there and execute on that job, because it's a hospital shutdown. You can't just shut down a hospital for 2 seconds, because there's a lot of people in there depending on power being in there. So that was a huge issue for him. But in the end, it wasn't necessarily maybe so much the money factor or the profit on the job. It was more so also the resource of his time being applied to that job. It was exponentially more time required by him than it would on his other projects. And that's just another lesson. Even something as simple as public to private projects can be all the difference.
Exactly.
Look, Tom, obviously that's your background in more so the in the field, running your own business as well. But I want to talk about 76 to 86. You're the founder, you're the president of the large international consultancy firm serving the contract surety industry. Tell me a bit about that time in your career. What was that like, and what were the lessons learned and whatnot there?
Well, first of all, we learned we were doing all different types of businesses. And everyone said, how can you finish an electrical contractor one day, a tunneler, a highway contractor, a building contractor? Every type of construction you can think of was bonded, and we would finish that work. And it was much easier than one might think. We would basically either support the existing construction company financially and secretly, quietly. We would superimpose our influence and bring in the funds to manage the business if we could arrange cooperation. And we never got one job at a time, the way we got the projects was the firm itself would bankrupt or be insolvent, and we would try to prevent bankruptcy
Yeah.
so that we would get dozens of projects at a time.
Yeah.
The largest one we ever did, we got projects in 38 of the 50 states in the United States. They had projects in 38 states. So it took 4 years to finish the work.
Yeah.
So we get them in bundles. But the company already had on hand the people that knew how to build them. So we would typically either support the contractor, or if for whatever reason he would not accept support, he or she, we would then hire those people because the jobs would be closed down. They'd be out of work. And then complete the work using their people.
Yeah.
And it ties in with something else we're going to talk about, which is there are no bad projects.
Yeah.
These projects weren't making money. They weren't profitable, but that wasn't our problem. Our problem was our client needed to get them finished and done and get out of there.
Yeah.
So profit was not the object. Speed, quality, and completion
Yeah.
was the objective. It was really what I describe as construction in heaven. When profit's not the object, you can almost say, and I wouldn't say it in front of my clients, money's no object.
Yeah. Yeah.
The amount of money today was nothing compared to get them closing the bond out and satisfying the obligee, which was the owner.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that. Just recently, we've been working with a client there in the demolition industry, and similar thing is, for them, their original focus was largely on a profitability side of things on their project. So they're looking at the profit and loss, and it's looking fantastic for these projects. But the problem was, because they were in a growth phase and they had 5 projects going on at once, they weren't resourcing those projects correctly. So they ended up having one machine on one project and one guy, one machine on another, and they ended up dispersing their resources across all these different projects. The profit and loss still looked all right, but because they weren't resourcing them correctly and getting in and out, is a project that should have been taking 3 weeks was turning into 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
The profit and loss still looked all right. And that was one of the big lessons we had to teach with them. Obviously, there's a little bit of difference there, but it's amazing how much, why you can't just focus on the numbers side of things as well, is it's also making sure you can get in there and get it done, get it completed.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're really going to struggle. And sometimes that means, pouring the resources into that project to just get it finished, get it moved on, get the cash in the door from the client to then go to the next one.
Exactly.
So I'm just curious, Tom. So obviously, as you talk about your future and where you've been, is you have a very deep interest in understanding what those challenges and issues have been in the industry and why there have been, so many construction business failures, and why it still today is, I think you mentioned it's second only to restaurants in terms of insolvency, and I believe that's the same in Australia. Is, back in 76, 86, what was your passion? Why were you so passionate to go into that industry and actually, seek to help and assist these businesses and these projects when they're in this financial distress? What was the attraction to go that way?
Well, having been a building contractor already for 15 years, the building process really interested me. And I was, that was my line of work, my trade, my belief. And doing other types of work, managing the experts, understanding from the research that the business side of the business was the same, whether I was a plumber, electrician, or painter. It just felt driven to do it. There was a huge need in the United States. The surety companies prior to 1975 had never lost money, just counting how much they collected in a year and how much they spent in a year. And that's what I call the insy-outsy method, which they don't really use because the bonds they sell in this year don't fail for 2 or 3 more years. Yeah. So the losses related to the income directly from them aren't associated. Just on the insy-outsy, they never lost money. In 1976, over 1 year difference, every surety in the United States lost money except one. And the one that didn't lost money in 1977.
Yeah, yeah.
That is the year I went into that business in 1976. but by dumb luck, and the sureties were just becoming buried
Yeah.
in the work.
Yeah.
And their complaint when I began, what I really wanted as a contractor, to get contracts to finish those jobs. But that wasn't what they were interested. You had to be a pure consultant.
Yeah.
And I realized I would have to spin off a business and I'd be a contractor in consultant's clothing, if you will. So I had to wear a three-piece suit and a tie in order to sell the work and then go out and get it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But only work for bonding companies, which is what I did. And prior to that, the people that were completing them, they were hiring engineering firms and big architectural firms who weren't builders, they were designers. And they would come in and they would say, we can get this done for you, but we have no idea what it's going to cost till it's finished.
Yeah.
I came in, realized they wanted to know the number up front. I said, I can tell you within 2 weeks, any job, any size, what it's going to cost you, the most it's going to cost you in the end.
Yeah.
By job, by bond.
Yeah.
They went berserk. The first company that ever gave me a job says, I'm going to give you this job because I don't think you can do it. And for the contractors that'll be listening or watching this, they should understand that what the surety asked, the people prior to me and the people that the competitors that came after me never listened to the question. They estimated the work like they were contractors, and we always sharpen our pencil and say, what do we think the lowest cost we can bid this on so we can get the work? They were saying, what's the most it's going to cost?
Yeah.
Well, I looked at that and I listened carefully and I said, all I need to do is pad it up.
Yeah.
They're asking for the top number.
Yeah.
So I'd come up with what I believed would be, just to make up a number. I said, I think this is going to be about a $7 million loss. I'd put a contingency on every line item and turn in a detailed estimate that showed a $10 million loss.
Yeah.
Then I'd get in to finish the job. Everything that could go wrong would go wrong, and we'd spend $8 million.
Yeah.
And they'd turn around and say, you saved us $2 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they never figured out is they asked me, what's the most? So I had to say, if everything went wrong, this is what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
And of course, some things went wrong, but never did everything go wrong.
Yeah.
So it was actually, it wasn't that hard. It was fascinating. It was challenging. The sureties that pick up the phone, particularly on a Friday, and they'd say, you need to be in Dallas tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And I'd say, what's the problem? We got this guy's failing. We need somebody down there right away. And we would respond, which we had to do very quickly. We actually had 2 corporate aircraft. We were flying all over everywhere constantly.
Yeah.
But they'd say, the first question would be, can you have 5 guys in Buffalo tomorrow? And I'd say, yes, I can. Never say no. Then when they calm down, I'd say, let me get into the details of this. Let me call Buffalo and see what's going on up there. I'd call them back and say, look, I could bring 5 guys there, but there won't be anything for them to do. I need to start slow.
Yeah.
I need to get there and get my feet in, get 2 guys there, see how we do for a couple of days, and then get a few more and get a few more.
Yeah.
They say, oh, good. You take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, some of it you had to have a little bit of salesmanship. So I learned a lot of different things than just construction.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they were happy because we got it done.
Yeah.
And they had never seen anyone get it done on time, on budget.
Yeah. It's such a unique experience delving into that side of things, from being a contractor yourself to going into the surety side of things. I'm curious because just from that alone, forgetting about the academic side of things that occurred later, in those 2 phases, at that time, what did you find to be the main reasons why so many contractors end up in that situation where they're in financial distress and they need to be turned around or saved, or even the projects themselves?
One of the problems in our industry nationwide, and I'm guessing the same in Australia, but I'm only guessing, I can tell you it's nationwide in the United States, and that is we as construction people don't realize how very specialized we are.
Yeah.
One of the examples that I throw around is if you do, as a company, successfully 10 one-story buildings a year, why not build one 10-story building? You'd have all your work in one place. And of course, it brings a smile to everyone's face because building one-story buildings is not the same as building a 10-story building.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that when I was building one-story buildings, not that I didn't want to build 10-story. In fact, I was probably dumb enough to think I could. And then someone would say, well, how come these people that build them know how? Because they used to build 3-story and 4 and 5, and now they're building 10. They've learned.
Yeah.
So what I discovered as the common causes of these failures was it was basically and simplistically change in size of project, change in type of project, change in location of project, and change in key personnel.
Yeah.
Were the 4 primaries. And everyone, a lot of my audiences, and I've lectured about this constantly, they'd say the size. I mean, how could it matter that much? And one of the examples I like to use is all of us, all contractors, all the people you deal with do small jobs, they do medium-sized jobs, and they do large jobs.
Yeah.
And if they're honest with themselves, because statistics are printed annually, small work makes a good percentage of profit.
Yeah.
Medium-sized work makes a fair percentage of profit, but less percent than that small work.
Yeah.
And the larger jobs make less than the medium.
Yeah.
So one would say, well, why not just take the high profit small jobs? Well, for a couple of things, there's not enough small jobs. Secondly, it's not satisfying. We all want to grow. But our sweet spot is typically in the middle.
Yeah.
The larger jobs, we want them. It gives us a place to have some continuous work, some steady people, some regular income. Even if it's less profit, it's our anchor. It helps us get through the year.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't want to load up on just larger, low profit jobs, and many companies do, and they simply make less money.
Yeah.
So these companies would do that. Same thing with type of work. An electrical contractor that wires houses in the typical voltage and smaller wires that a residence would have, then takes a factory job. Well, he's not used to running cable that's 2.5 inches thick and, 440 and 880 with big voltage and high powered and expensive boxes. It's very different.
Yeah.
They're both called electrical contractors. They're both licensed the same way, but their experience isn't in the other type of work.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you do factories, high voltage, low voltage, sign work, whatever you do it well. Doesn't mean you can do the other. And you probably can get it done. The question is, can you get it done for a profit?
Yeah.
And can you price it?
Yeah.
So they're very different. So type of work matters. Location. They do the work a little different from one major area to another. They just do. It happens by custom. It happens by culture. But for whatever reason, it's just a little different.
Yeah. Yeah.
When my brother and I, who worked in northern New Jersey on the east coast of the United States, we did all our own flat work. That is our floors, concrete floors, that kind of work. When we got to South Jersey, our first job in South Jersey, there's a separate flat work subcontractor infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's a specialty. They do it, and they do it cheaper than you can do it.
Yeah.
Well, we go down there and we think we're going to do it, and we just don't have the cooperation from the rebar people, from the concrete delivery, from anything.
Yeah.
First job we did wrong. Second job we subbed it out.
Yeah.
They just do it different here and different there.
Yeah.
And the lastly, key personnel. You're doing $3 million a year. You're doing great. You got 10, 15 guys that really know what they're doing, and you're getting the work done. You get twice that size, Now you got twice as many people, except though, and you've doubled your size in a couple of 3 years. Now you got twice as many people than you had 3 years ago, which means you've got 50% new employees,
Yeah.
not tested, not proven, and you've diluted your workforce.
Yeah.
It may work, it may be great, and it may not. There's the part in business, you don't deal in maybes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to deal in more certainty. So there's actually a self-imposed self-reality of this, how fast you can grow.
Yeah.
And that's how fast you can absorb people into the organization and maintain your culture.
Yeah. I'm just curious, Tom, to just dive a little bit deeper into, you were talking there, key projects, like project size and project type, and contractors going into new project sizes or new project types. And that's something that we see a lot. And I know you've written a lot about this. I'm curious to hear though, what is your advice to trade business owners who, they're at their current level and they're doing the smaller size projects, and they get an opportunity to do a medium or a larger project? Obviously we don't want to say, no, you shouldn't do it at all. We're all for, building the experience and understanding what those new areas potentially look like, new size projects, new project types. What would your advice though be in terms of tackling those? Because something that we see a lot is contractors going all in, and particularly when it comes to the project size element, is when they go for a larger project, they go completely all in on it, are unexperienced with it, and it sinks their business because they're just not prepared for it. They don't have the resourcing, the cash flow, experience, everything you've mentioned there. What would your advice be then to those contractors if they wanted to venture into those areas? How should they best approach it?
Well, one of the things they should understand is some natural realities about growth. For example, someone growing at 10% a year, they'd say that's very modest. 10% is nothing. In 5 years, you've grown 60%. In 7 years, you've doubled the size of your business.
Yeah.
So that's 10% is actually considerable growth.
Yeah.
But there's 2 or 3 good jobs, and I have the opportunity. My market's growing. I'm growing at 20%. You double your size in 4 years.
Yeah.
Now there's even more work, and I grow at 30%. If I continue to grow at 30%, I am actually going to double my size in 3 years, because it compounds itself. It's like compound interest.
Yeah.
And you can't really double your size overnight. And anyone that thinks they can is taking a real risk. And somebody in this audience is going to say, I've done it. Yeah, I hope you haven't done it years in a row. You just did it 1 year.
Yeah.
Because there's growing pains. So we have this natural growth pattern that's a problem. And we can't continuously grow. If we have a burst of speed, the market's good, we can get the people, we can do the work. We're still not sure we can price it because we're pricing it now really fast. And they say, well, I got 3 new estimators. And my answer is, yeah, you got 3 new estimators, untested. The only way you know how good they are is when you get the work, finish it, and it comes in at the price they've set.
Yeah.
So, new people are a problem. There's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
You just have your own system, network, and culture that's working on your behalf. So you're straining it. So my advice is that we need to grow at some kind of reasonable pace. And even at a lower pace, if we're straining our organization to grow for, say, 3 years in a row, we've grown. That's a struggle. At some point, you need to halfway level off. Don't shrink. Maybe not go completely flat, but stop growing too fast, to take a breath, to get organized.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about our market is it's cyclical. Now, I can't guarantee it because I haven't done the research for Australia, but in the United States, our construction market is cyclical. It follows the economy, but it lags the economy by 12 to 18 months. So when the market is going well, and I'm growing with it, one of the exposures I have is it is cyclical. It goes down periodically, not a whole bunch, and sometimes not too long,
Yeah.
but statistically, up till the current recession we may be facing, since World War II, there's been 7 downturns in the construction market in the United States.
Yeah.
And that's roughly every 10, actually it's 11.3 years. Sometimes it was 8, sometimes it was 14 years, but it's going to happen.
Yeah.
When we grow in this industry, we typically bring on full-time overhead, permanent overhead,
Yeah.
because it's believed that you can't get half a person, half a truck, or half an office.
Yeah.
So we bring it on, and then the market slows a little, and we typically fight like heck to keep our volume up. But all of our competitors are fighting like heck to keep their volume up, and none of us are going to, because it's not there.
Yeah.
If the market goes down, we as an industry constantly are saying, but I'm not going to shrink.
Yeah.
And in every down market, in the 7 since World War II in the United States, profits have evaporated. And on the longer downturns, the whole industry, on average, has gone into losses.
Yeah.
There's nothing more wasting of our time than to build for clients for a loss.
Yeah.
That's basically giving away construction. That's not the business we're in. So the whole growth thing has to be really thought through, and then anticipate the fact that if I bring on this overhead, I may regret it.
Yeah. And this is something that you're always talking about. And, even with the growth side of things there and the rate of growth, is that something that, obviously from an accounting perspective, we see that all the time. And I think you've spoken a lot about this, Tom, is I forget what you call it specifically, but essentially it's like stepped growth is.
Yes.
Yeah. So that way, and like you're saying, is you grow a bit and you stabilize, you make sure everything's in place. You give yourself some breathing room to stabilize, and you go again. And, that couldn't be more true, because, I can't tell you the amount of times when we start working with contractors and they might be turning, $2, $3, $4, $5 million per year, but they've grown from that since 2017. And it's just exceptional growth. And they're going, from the outside, most people would look at that and go, wow, they must be doing really, really well. But you pop the hood, you look underneath and look at their finances, it's not in good shape, because it's just, the amount of cash that business has needed to resource and fund its growth in working capital and purchasing new assets, investing in equipment, investing in new team members, is that just drains the cash. It doesn't matter if you've got, 5, 10, 15% profitability on your projects, is that rate of growth requires so much cash. And
I have actually seen and had to clean up after contractors that cash flowed themselves out of business. And by that, I mean, they grew so rapidly, and particularly taking larger and larger jobs. Seems to me when somebody owes me $500,000, it takes a while to collect it. When they owe me $2 million, it takes longer. And what happens is, and I don't know if you have standard retainage in Australia, but typically we have retainage built into our contracts.
Yep.
So we're not paid 100% of what we bill. Yeah. There's a retainage. And as that stretches out, we spend the money from day 1 in a month to day 30, and we haven't even earned the right to bill.
Yeah.
Till day 30. Now we bill and they don't pay us.
Yeah.
So from the first dollar we've put in the first week of the month, we're waiting 30, 60, in some cases longer.
Yeah.
Less retainage. And we're simply not collecting as much money as we're spending, because in growth, we're spending faster than we're being paid.
Yeah.
And I've actually liquidated companies that every job was profitable, but they were insolvent in that they could not pay their bills.
Yeah. 100%.
And their banks eventually called their loans.
Yeah.
And they were out of business, and they were profitable.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see that so many times, and it's that understands we like to communicate it as cash flow is a story and profitability is just chapter 1. And typically
Exactly.
that's what most contractors look at. They just look at their profit and loss, go, yep, we got profitability there, but it's the balance sheet. And they're not looking at the balance sheet because it's complex. It doesn't make sense. There's numbers, there's no flow, it's scattered. And they're not understanding the investment that they've got in working capital and the other capital, which is the purchasing of assets, equipment. All of that is what's draining the cash. Then it comes to cash. Yeah, we've modeled out for clients, and we put out the profit and loss and the balance sheet next to each other. And we go, how much cash did this business make? And they immediately go to profitability. Oh, $200,000 they've made? No, $200,000 was chapter one. Now you've got to subtract the investment in working capital. Then you've got to subtract the investment in the remaining capital of equipment and so forth. Then the business has actually ended up with negative $300,000 cash because they've had so much investment. And, like what we're talking about here, that's the factor of, and probably the biggest killer that we see of companies that are growing and seem successful, and they get to that 2, 3, 4, 5 million plus, and they go under. And people go, why did they go under? It's that the growth is too rapid.
Exactly. When you say how much cash has a company on, people do turn to profit.
Yeah.
And you've got profit is a paper number.
Yeah.
You can't pay your bills with a promise to receive. You need to pay them in cash.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Is you spend it in growth, you spend it faster than you can possibly collect it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, just to conclude this point, is one of my favorite lines is revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality. And I think if contractors make that their morning mantra, I think they'll be all right.
Troy, that is the second or third line that I'm going to steal from you. I hope you know that. I'm going to start quoting you all over the United States. So you're going to see it in these weekly messages. That's beautiful.
Well, I've been quoting you for years, Tom, reading all your stuff. I really love what you're talking about. And, I think it's amazing, US to Australia, the amount of similarities. And obviously when we first started speaking, you spoke about, and you're probably a bit more cautious going, I'm not sure if this is the case in Australia. Everything you say is pretty much identical. It's the same. There's probably, economically, the US economy can be a bit more volatile than the Australian one. And I think we've spoken about that before, but, largely across the board, business is business, running a construction business, running a construction business. And we face, identical challenges. And I love hearing what you've got to say with it because
exactly.
of years of experience.
Yep. Growth in and of itself is not the issue. It's rate of growth.
Mm.
And sometimes I use the analogy of a speedometer. If you're going along at 50 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, you're getting there and you're pretty safe.
Yeah.
You're going along at 75 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Take you longer to stop. And if anything goes wrong, you don't get hurt, you get killed.
Yeah.
It's just simply the rate of growth raises the risk.
Yeah.
And substitute the word danger, raises the danger.
Yeah.
And then there's this big job come up, and now I'm going to go 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the truth is you might make it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
There are no mights or maybes in business.
Yeah.
Business management has to be sure things.
Yeah.
You're playing with real money. It's not a card game.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to one of your, that we're just speaking about for this podcast, is one of your latest blogs. Don't be the gambler, be the bookie.
Right.
100%. Is, most contractors are the gambler. They're going in, not really, being that calculated with how they're approaching it, diving in. Whereas if you're being the bookie, you're coming at it from, a much more analytical approach of understanding what the actual cost basis is, understanding your numbers, getting the right people involved to help you and assist you in making sure that you're, not going at just, oh, I hope this works out, but I know this is going to work out based off the costs that I've considered, the numbers I've considered, that it makes sense. Is you're what's it called? You're essentially basing your own luck.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. I really love that. But I guess, another article that I saw, and this is a question for you, Tom, and it goes into largely what we're talking about there is, recently you compared contractors to Wall Street gurus. And you spoke about how these Wall Street gurus value growth over profitability. And it's the same with contractors. But I want to get your understanding. Obviously, this expands onto a bit more of what we're just saying there. But why is valuing growth over profitability an issue in our industry?
The stock market, at least in the United States, we have stocks constantly, particularly startups and technical companies that look real flashy, that are just growing rapidly, and they attract huge investment, and people are investing in them.
Yeah.
But they've yet to make a profit.
Yeah.
I mean, you have stocks like Microsoft. Microsoft in its first 12 or 14 years didn't make $1.
Yeah.
Now, that one worked out. Eventually, if you bought it cheap,
Yeah.
you did fine. But there's a bunch of them that it didn't work out. So the whole objective in public companies seems to be rapid growth, because that brings in investment, brings in individual stock buyers.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for construction, mainly because our cycle is such that we need to bring raw material to the project, construct it, sell it to our owner, be paid late,
Yeah.
invest ahead of time to be paid forward. If we were a manufacturing company, we would bring in raw material, we'd warehouse it, we'd then move it to production, we would then warehouse it, we would then send it out in distribution and be paid for it.
Yeah.
But that cycle is continuous.
Yeah.
And we can know exactly what it costs us, because those widgets that we're making, many more than one is completed in a 1-year cycle.
Yeah.
In a construction company, we've got our financial statement in front of us, and we've got jobs that have just started, jobs that have finished that were started last year, and jobs that did get completed during the cycle, but not enough of them to be confident that we know our numbers.
Yeah.
There's too much guesswork in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that often we really don't know where we stand.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess that really does tie into everything we were just talking about there. Is if you're a contractor listening, is it can be so easy to get caught up in the like we were talking about, the vanity metric of revenue and growth, because that top line revenue is sexy and you want to go for that number. But if you're not profitable, if you're not profit driven, you're going to run into some serious issues. And obviously this ties into what you were talking about before there. We touched a little bit on the recession side of things, or a downturn, and contractors trying to maintain volume. And I think something that a lot of contractors don't understand is when the market or the economy shrinks, so it goes from 100% of what it was to 70%. If you try and maintain your volume in your business, it's actually not maintaining. You're actually trying to take greater market share, because the market has shrunk. So now you're actually looking to take over more of the competitors' work and grow your market share. That's just mathematically, that's how it works. And with that, as we all know, market share comes at a cost. There is a marketing acquisition cost to increase that market share. And with that is naturally, like you was talking about earlier, Tom, is because you're having to increase market share and maintain volume, generally that's coming at the sacrifice of profitability. It's
exactly.
It's not even, just valuing growth. It's we're in a downturn. It's valuing of trying to stay the same level when the market around you is shrinking. And that's going to cost you in profit, which at the end of the day, I'm sure you've seen many contractors go under because of that fatal mistake.
It's my belief that if the cycle in the United States wasn't greater than almost 9 years profitable, 3 years downturn, really 2.6, 2.7, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
We basically suffer those 2 or 3, but as long as there's 8 good ones, 9 good years, we're happy with it, and we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
We should make money every year, but we haven't designed our companies to exploit the growth and then cooperate with the market and downsize.
Yep. Yep. Well, just
when
on
the,
that,
when the
Tom,
market downsizes.
yeah, on that, Tom, that's my next question actually is, obviously because right now there's been a lot of talk of, especially in the US, recession, and obviously Australia typically follows what happens the US from an economic sense, and I guess largely a lot of world issues. But looking at where the economy's going and talks of recession, I want to get your insights, because obviously you mentioned downsizing there, but I would like to get a bit of a full picture from you of how contractors listening to our podcast right now, how they should best plan for these cycles in business, and more specifically, how they can best plan for this downturn that's expected to come over the next 12 to 24 months.
The market cycles, there's just no doubt about it. Statistically, I've been publishing about that for probably 15, 17 years in the United States. I'm not sure how the market cycles in Australia, but I'm convinced it does.
Yeah.
And if I'm a contractor, growing or declining market doesn't matter. I need to look at the market to come.
Yeah.
And everyone says, what do you think over the next couple of years? And I'll answer that question because I usually have an opinion. But no matter what, somewhere out there, there's a downturn.
Yeah.
And I've been saying that now for 3 years because we're going on 15 years upturn.
Yeah.
We're at the extreme of any growing market that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing that says to me is there's got to be a decline out there somewhere.
Yeah.
So if I'm telling you I'm certain there's a decline out there, and I don't know if it's next year or the year, but it's out there, what are you going to do when it declines? And most contractors say, we're going to tighten our belt, we're going to get through it and do fine on the other end, because it took me forever to train up these people, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do, and I can't do it. I was given this lecture one time in 2009. And if anybody remembers the United States, 2008, our housing market died. 2009, our entire construction market crashed and stayed down, declining for 3 years. Depending on where you were located, it went down as much as 30%. It was really painful. But I'm in 2009 talking to commercial contractors, and we had not started down. 2009 would end up the year showing a decline. I'm lecturing to a group of contractors, maybe 40 of them in the room, talking about just this, saying we need to cut back early on because this is going to be a long and a deep decline. Everybody kept saying, but you can't be sure of that. And I said, I'll accept that. Say it's 50-50, say I'm wrong, and you cut back. You can put people back on.
Yeah.
You cut back, you're going to make more money.
Yeah.
Say I'm right, and you didn't cut back. Now you're going to lose money.
Yeah.
I'm just setting it up for you. The best way is the conservative move.
Yeah.
And I'm going through this and explaining, don't give away. The market's going to fall out from under us. And then if a lot of the work goes cheap, I don't want a lot of work. So the smartest contractor actually downsizes first. That starts not to make sense. You're saying, if I'm so smart, how come I got to downsize and these other guys aren't? My answer is they're going to load up on cheap work.
Yeah.
This guy in the back of the room raises his hand. And I know him right away. He's the president of the division of one of our larger national construction firms. And he was in the marketplace that I was lecturing in. And he says, Tom, he says, if I laid these people off, it took me forever to get them, to train them up. I said, okay, how much do you think the market's going to go down? He said, well, according to you, I better lay off about 20%. I said, of project managers and above, how many do you have? He says, probably 20 of them. And I said, what's 20% of that? He said, 4. I said, are you going to lay off your best 4 people? He said, no. I said, oh, you're going to lay off your worst 4? He said, yeah. I said, then your numbers are going to go up instantaneously.
Yeah.
Because you just increased the quality of your work by dropping off the worst 20% of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I'm doing it for effect. The class is laughing just like you are.
Yeah.
And they're getting the point. And he said, so you're saying I'll make money either way. And if you're really right, and this is deeper and longer, he said, when I'm healthy coming back, I'll be able to hire better for people than I laid off.
Yep.
I said, well, I'm
Bingo.
not guaranteeing that. He said, well, if I'm laying my worst four off, what do I care? I said, that's what I'm trying to say to the room. If your worst four's going, what are you caring about?
Yeah.
And we had this great session, but he came up to me later. He said, I'm so glad I forced you into that dialogue, because he said, you're right.
Yeah.
He said, I'm going to clean up he said, I got those people in my mind already. I'm going back and fire them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got a question for you, Tom. Did they go through that GFC period okay from going, taking on that advice?
That guy came back to me. I'd see him all the time at meetings. And he'd walk over and said, I got to thank you for 2 years. He said, I got to thank you for 2 years. He said, I'm the star nationally of our regional companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said, because I just went in and cut it back and took the risk.
Yeah.
And it just paid off in spades.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I really do. And I guess on that topic, Tom, this is something else I want to talk about, because obviously you're talking about downsizing and cutting back. One of your, common topics that you talk about, and it does get a bit of criticism, as you've mentioned to me, is the concept of flexible overhead. Because obviously, there's a lot of contractors out there that may be concerned about, cutting down costs, and, all these permanent costs are going to get rid of. Something you talk about is that flexible overhead concept. Do you mind just breaking that down a little bit? Because that might assist contractors listening to this in terms of guiding their decision in, well, how do I actually go about downsizing? Because I'm going to struggle to actually cut stuff, but flexible overhead could potentially be that solution long-term for them.
Yeah, it'll probably need to be, if everyone's interested, a subject for another time, because it's much longer than the time we have left.
Yeah.
But even when I do 1 and 2 hour seminars on just that subject, I spend the lion's share trying to convince my audience to even consider it, because people have described it to me as suicide. You're asking me to dismantle my organization.
Yeah.
And really, if you were coming out of a recession, which is really where it gained its popularity. In the United States, we started to get out of the recession, the construction market recession, in 2014 and 15.
Yeah.
Little relief in 13, and then it started to really come back. Well, I was pushing flexible overhead during the agonizing downsizing.
Yeah.
And what I was saying was, now that you're already downsized, don't be too quick to put the overhead back on permanently.
Yeah.
You have got to have the overhead. It's the home office overhead that supports the field.
Yeah.
And if you double your size, you pretty much have to double your home office overhead. Everybody says, no, there's an economy of scale and you do better. No, it's a straight line. You need that support.
Yeah.
You got 20 people on the payroll and you've got a certain amount of cost of making payroll. When you got 40 people on the payroll, you got twice as much effort making up payroll. It's that simple. It's pretty straight line. And the flexible overhead, which I developed over 3 years, what's interesting in it is in 2 years, I was finished. And when I do projects like this, I have a group of construction people from around the country that are willing to be received by mail my material and comment on it.
Yeah.
Give and critique it, really tear it apart for me.
Yeah.
And the resistance to downsizing was so great that I spent another year. One of the reasons I taught at Arizona State University School of Construction for so many years was I needed the graduate students. I like to call the research my work, but anyone who's done any serious research knows you have to have the graduate students to do the work.
Yeah.
So it has to be based in the university. It's why I stayed there so long, because you need those minions to do all the dog work
Yeah.
that research requires. And after a year, I was able to demonstrate, my research team, without a doubt, that this was the way you had to downsize. And that was, we took every piece of overhead and developed a method in which you could put it on temporarily.
Yeah.
Now, in some cases, it wasn't as cheap putting it on temporarily as it was permanently. But the small difference I describe as the cost of insurance, the cost of being able to. And what I did was come up with, and there's a whole series, you could actually lend people a copy of chapter 4 of my latest book is
Yep.
on flexible overhead. And what it demonstrates is we're going to keep some percentage of our overhead, and I do it at 15, 20, and 25, mostly just to suit my audience. Because if you don't have a stomach to have 25% flexible, start with 5.
Yeah.
See how you like it. Start with 10, go to 15.
Yeah.
But I like it at all the way to 25, depending on the type of contractor you are. And what it is it enables you to do 25% less work, to cut your overhead by 25% within a week.
Yeah.
Not slow it down, not leased equipment, rented equipment. People, temporary employment that you can get rid of in a week. Just, you can shop it, because occasionally, even in a good market, if I've got a really big job I'm counting on and it falls apart, I find a dip in my sales during the year because I was counting on that and I didn't bid on 2 others. And this portion that's flexible is turned off like a light switch. And I have it in every category. So the usefulness of it is what I'm trying to sell us. Something discovered after it was distributed is you go along at a specific size, 25% of your overhead is flexible. You grow beyond that, then you put some more permanent on underneath it. But if all of a sudden there's the opportunity for exceptional growth because you've learned the principles of flexible overhead and how to do it, you can actually grow 25% with no overhead because you know how to put temporary overhead on.
Yeah.
So it gives you a swing of dropping 25% or growing to it. It's the people that use it, and there are hundreds of construction companies in the US of every size using it that are just raving about it. They're completely relaxed.
Yeah.
Because they don't have it as permanent.
Yeah.
Now, that little bit is just a teaser. It's hard to describe in the time remaining. In fact, it's hard to describe it in an hour.
Yeah.
How that actually works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why it works, and the war stories of how I did it and researched it. But it can be done. There's hundreds of our brother and sister contractors doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it works. And just think, if it would work, what a relaxing place that would be for us.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a great concept. And I feel like for many of those listening to this, it's probably something that they may not have heard about. But if you want to learn more about that, is like Dr. Schleifer was talking about there, is chapter 4. And which book specifically is that, Dr. Schleifer, that anyone could go purchase if they want it?
Oh, the first one you mentioned,
that was the Secrets to Construction Business Success.
Secrets to Construct, yeah, that one.
Yeah, perfect. So anyone listening, I strongly recommend go out there, go buy that book, because there is a lot of learnings. I'm only really touching the surface on this podcast because I wanted to touch over many of these topics. But for those listening, is if you really want to get that deeper insight, you've got to purchase the books and read into the knowledge base that Tom has. It's fantastic. So I guess, Tom, turning over to the other side now, where you experience the recession, how contractors should prepare for that recession, is at the same time, there's probably going to be a lot of contractors who are looking to grow and take things to the next level, especially on the backside of tough times. What advice would you have for them to tackle that?
On the growth, it's the rate of growth. I'll repeat that, is the high rate of growth just maximizes the risk.
Yeah.
I actually took, when I was in the business 10 years, I was later in it longer, the surety business. I took and had the students graph my failed companies, 1,156 of them. And they were little points on a graph. And the graph was size, total amount, in over time.
Yep.
And it turned out that the companies that failed were in the rapid growth area. So a line came between them. I call it 15%. It was exactly 17.2%. All 87% of the failed companies were growing faster than 15%.
Mm.
So I said that's a magic line. You know, that amount of growth doesn't sound like a whole lot. It's above it was clearly danger. I dropped it to 10, hypothetically saying most companies can grow at 10% fairly risk-free, although I don't recommend it 3, 4, and 5 years in a row. You need a rest period.
Yeah.
Anything above it is a little bit dangerous. And above a 25% rate of growth, 50% of the companies were under it. It just was up. You didn't ever want to go that fast.
Yeah, that's amazing. That really, and that's something that I hadn't read of your work yet. So that's very, very interesting. That and that'll be something that I'll be blasting out to the audiences. Man, that's insane. So you don't 17% sustain anything over that, and you're really in a danger zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Wow. Well, I guess we'll keep going through, Tom, because I don't want to keep you too long. But that's some really great advice there for a lot of the contractors. But I just want to, coming into the end of this podcast, just to turn directions a bit, is one of my favorite quotes from you, and you alluded to it before, is there are no bad projects, just bad matches of contractors to projects. Now, could you just break down what you mean by that? Because I think that's probably a bit of a controversial line. And when I've brought it up with contractors, they go, "What are you talking about?" I'd love to get your thoughts on that line.
I'm glad you brought it up because it is a debated point. Somebody will say that job was a dog. Nobody could have made money on it. It was a problem from day one, and all the other excuses. And of course, it's the pride issue. It's a problem. We took the job, we priced it, and we didn't profit from it. It's easier to blame the job.
Yeah.
We finished 1,156 failed projects. They all got completed.
Yeah.
The job themselves had no danger within it. Some are harder than others, but if it's very difficult, and even if it's very risky, the qualified contractor to build it knows how to price that risk.
Yeah, and negotiate the terms. And
they get it done.
Yeah.
So in so many of the failed projects, we would use the second, third, or fourth bidder, whoever was most qualified, to bid the job. And it would turn out that the contractor who failed and bankrupt trying to do it had the wrong price because he wasn't qualified to price it.
Yeah.
Or was not performing correctly because he wasn't qualified to perform it.
Yeah.
Or both, wasn't qualified to price it or perform it. But the guy who was much more money than him was qualified in both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody can build it.
Yeah.
Every complicated job gets done. The problem is it needs to be built for a profit.
Yeah.
I had a failed project right here in Arizona, of all places, and it was a mini convention building, and the roof was sloped in several directions. It was actually a parabola. It was, if you put a straight line in it, it was like a spiral staircase roof.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a flat area. It was very, good to look at. It was a round building. By the way, any round buildings, you do want your competitor to get that job. Construction is straight lines. Round buildings, the low bidder made a mistake.
Yeah.
We can't build them. We, the industry, haven't built enough of them to profit from it. They will always be built for a loss, and I'll stand by that. Anyway, this thing didn't have a straight line inside or out, and got completed. at 3 times the low bid.
Wow.
And it was scheduled for 2 years and took 5.
That's insane.
Now, that's not maybe, that's real dollars gone.
Yeah.
And I don't ask anybody to be sympathetic with the bonding companies because they make money too.
Yeah.
But the truth is, it's an embarrassment for our industry.
Yeah. 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 And I just think, I think for many a contractors is that line, there are no bad projects, just bad matches of contractors to projects. I think that holds fast and holds true very, very strongly. And if you're having issues with projects, delivering projects profitably, sometimes it's not blaming outward, it's looking inward. Have reflection. What could have we done better? Because if you go into something like that again, is take the lessons, take that ownership of where did we go wrong? What can we do better moving forward? What would we do different? And if you have that reflection, you're going to be better prepared in the future.
Exactly.
Tom, if you could give any advice to Australian trade and construction business owners out there listening to this podcast right now, what would that be?
Well, we haven't touched on the subject too much, but our industry is evolving and it's maturing. Having been the second highest failure rate, you'd have to describe it as a little less sophisticated than a lot of industries.
Yep.
And one of our problems is, with our history of low bid gets it, we typically used to get on the job and there was nothing to cooperate about. We were the cheapest one and we would change orders and we wanted to be paid extra and get the owner out of our way and let us go.
Yep.
Now with new contracting methods, construction management, design build, and all the various types, we're slower to realize that the new industry is evolving into a more partnering culture.
Yeah.
To prosper in this business, we need to be cooperating with our owners. Contractors are being invited on many jobs much earlier in the process in order to assist in the design and participate in what the project should evolve into. So I guess my final advice would be, let's cooperate with our owners. Let's not fight with them. We really need to be easy to do business with. To be the contractor of choice, owners are looking for people that are easy to do business with.
Yeah. Fantastic advice. And I think, like you said, we didn't really get a chance to touch on that, but I'd love to touch on that another time with you, Tom, is the whole working experience, customer experience. I think that's a side of construction that I feel like gets overlooked a little too much. And what you're talking about there is really the surface of that, is being easy to deal with, being helpful, being assisting, is, that's a whole deep topic that we can really go into at a later date.
We could really do one on this whole thing of we're not easy to do business with. I've got war stories about projects
that
were just a nightmare for clients.
I
had one in the West, big contractor. They did a big building. 40, 50 million, big job. And there's a mound of topsoil, which of course we store till the building's done and spread it back out to put the lawn in. The owner's representative goes to the project manager on the job, full-time project manager, and says, we want to have a picture of this building on our annual report this year. And can you get this mound out of here by the end of next week, because the photographer's coming? Says yes. Have it out of there. You'll be able to see the whole front of the building. Guy forgets. Same company is building another similar building, not a half a mile down the same road. And my contractor drives by it, and the contractor's sign is already up. They're clearing the ground. He contacts the owner immediately and he says, you didn't even ask us to be that we built this job down here for you. You were so happy with it. The construction guy said, I really wanted to use you. He said, but the chairman of our company was told that you guys were going to move a thing of dirt, and that's why he didn't get the picture he wanted. And he said, I want them on my site.
Wow, there you go. And
That's a true story.
that is
And I
synonymous
got a
with,
bunch of them.
yeah, synonymous with a million stories that we have over here of, contractors not understanding that. And I think that problem really does root from the fact that, particularly with the clients that we work with there, that sub 5 million range, is when they first started, they've been a tradesman, and all they've ever been trained to do is be a good tradesman. There's no understanding the value of customer experience, working experience, that once they actually become a business owner, is they're still trapped in that mindset of just deliver work. But it's one of those things, and I know you've mentioned this before, it's, even on a project, a large project, if the owner has a bad experience with just one project manager, one tradesman, hell, it could even be an apprentice on site, that could be to the detriment of that relationship, because that's a negative customer experience. You could deliver the best work in the world, or be the best electrician, best plumber, best carpenter in the world, but if your experience is shit that you're delivering to the customer, it's been a negative experience.
Yep. I had one on an addition to a big hospital, and the biggest owner complaint was almost throwing the contractor off the job. They were parking on the grass. Big no parking signs.
Yeah.
Tearing up the lawn.
Yeah.
And the contractor says, I got to get these trucks in there. You had contract limits.
Yeah.
And they didn't observe them.
There you go.
And the hospital administrator was berserk.
Yeah. Understandably.
Yeah. I mean, it goes on and on. One job was paper lunch bags flying all over the grass.
Yeah.
Just annoying the owner. They think that most contractors are the same. We're like a commodity.
Yeah.
So it's the experience that they remember, not the product. They assume the product's going to be good. And quite frankly, most of our owners are so unsophisticated in the trades that they don't really know a good job from a bad. They're not a good judge of quality.
Yeah.
Lucky for us. So they're judging you on how you behaved.
Yep. That's all they've got. And yet it's
that's all they've got.
It's that forgotten element. It's 100% that forgotten element. So Tom, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. A lot of people listening right now, I know, will have got, a lot of value out of this, a lot of, and there is a lot to be gained from what you've shared today. And I just wanted to thank you for coming on today's show. But I guess for those listening, what's the best way for them to read more about, these topics that you've spoken about today?
I think you're going to be supplying them with the link to be able to get the weekly construction message, which is no cost.
Yep.
And it hopefully will stimulate thinking. There's a link on the messages themselves. They can ask comments, questions, topics they want to have addressed.
Yep.
I'd be glad to have them in the club.
Yeah, awesome. And for any of those listening, I strongly recommend you take up Tom's offer. I think what he's got to share is absolutely fantastic, and we're going to be sharing a lot more of what Tom has and the information he's putting out there. So sign up for the weekly message. I strongly recommend you purchase his book, that Construction Business Success book as well, the latest one. You will get plenty of valuable insights of how you can better run your contracting business moving forward. So I really, again, Tom, I really appreciate you coming on. Any last thoughts, any final words?
No, thank you. I appreciate being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom, for coming on again. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.